Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Snowball Wealth Podcast, where we talk about how to get out of debt and start building wealth, especially if you're the first in your family to do so. My name is Tanya Menendez, and today on the show, we have Jannesse Torres, founder of Yo Queiro Dinero. Janesse is an award-winning Latina money expert. She became an accidental entrepreneur after a job loss inspired her to turn her food blog into a six-figure business. Janesse is on a mission to educate marginalized communities on topics like entrepreneurship, investing, financial independence through her 3-time award-winning personal finance podcast and platform, Yo Queiro Dinero. I was actually on that podcast, and it was one of the inspirations of starting this podcast. And so I am thrilled to have you on the show today, Janesse. And before we get started, I want to mention that she does have a book coming up called Financially Lit, and it will be published by Grand Central Publishing in early 2024. Welcome to the show, Janesse.
Thank you so much for having me, Tanya. I'm super excited to be here.
Well, I just want to get started by hearing a little bit about where you grew up and what were the conversations about money like at home?
Well, if you're anything like me, a first-gen Latina, there were not a lot of conversations about money growing up. And for me, that is no exception. So I'm Puerto Rican. My parents were high school sweethearts. They came over to the mainland in the 80s during the big diaspora. A lot of Puerto Ricans left the island because of the economic situation and just the fact that there were not a lot of opportunities for upward mobility. So I'm the oldest of two. And I always had a very clear understanding of what the expectations were for me growing up, which is go to school, get a degree, get a good job, go live the American dream, right? Go get married, have kids, all the things. So I found myself on that trajectory. I was always a good student. And so school always felt like the thing that made sense for me just because I was always, getting good grades. I ended up getting a full scholarship to college. And I thought that was going to be my path, right? I thought I was just going to go graduate, get a good job, and do the things. And by the time I was 25, I was like, oh my God, this is terrible. I don't like corporate America. I don't like this super structured way of living of, PTOs and somebody deciding how much money you can make and having a job that felt very repetitive and mundane. I ended up going into engineering and I just felt like there's something else here for me, but I just don't know what. And when I think about the ways in which I earn money now, they're just like completely opposite of what I saw growing up, which was just, you get a job, you stay there for 25, 30 years, you retire with a pension if you're lucky, and that's it. And for me, money has always felt like this thing that I didn't understand the power of it until I found folks in the financial independence community and in entrepreneurial communities that were talking about money in a completely different way. And that's for me what really started me on this path that I'm on now of being a full-time entrepreneur and now a financial educator, kind of giving folks permission to, do something different and see what you can create.
I love that. I love that story. And a lot of that resonated. And funny enough, my parents were also high school sweethearts.
Aw.
They came from Central America because of the ongoing wars and the civil wars in Central America that were going on there. But a lot of that resonated, I think, especially just like not understanding the using money as a tool for independence and knowing and even having the awareness that you can stop working before
Yeah.
60. Like no one tells you these things, right? And a lot of money is traditionally oral history. So a lot of it you hear from your family or, from people that you know. And if you don't have, parents that already were thinking that way, it's difficult, right? But I'm curious to hear how you actually, what was the first inspiration? Like, what was that wake up moment for you in saying like, I can do this and I want to do this?
Yeah. So for me, and I've found this to be true of many folks that I've spoken to on my podcast as well, our journeys with money tend to start with something traumatic happening. And for me, it was getting laid off from a job. It was the first and only time that I got laid off about 7 years into my career. I literally walked into work one day. I had an 8:30 meeting on my calendar with HR, and I'm like, "This is weird. You never want a meeting with HR." And I proceeded to walk into the office, was told I was let go, was going to get a severance package. I had 30 minutes to pack my things, and like that was it. I was shook. But 6 months before that, I'd actually started this passion project because, again, I was feeling just a lot of angst about feeling like this career was not aligned with what I wanted to do, but I needed some creative outlet. I didn't know, how could I restart my career or go and do something different. And that was my food blog, DelishD'lites.com. So I started that about 6 months before I got laid off. And I got home and I sat down on the couch and realized, wait a minute, these people just gave me like 3 months worth of salary. So I have some options here. I can either rush back to get another job just out of fear of like, oh my God, what's going to happen? Or I can take this break that I honestly wanted and needed in order to be able to focus some energy on this new project of mine and see where I can take it. And so I decided to take option B and just like give myself the permission to really pretend to be an entrepreneur for a couple of months without the pressure of trying to get a paycheck right away. And I think, obviously one of the things that allowed me to do that as well is that I was always used to living below my means. And so
Mhm.
I had robust emergency fund. I didn't need a lot. And so I knew,
Yeah.
I had this wiggle room to make that happen. And so I started really like taking it seriously, taking classes about blogging, learning about food styling and social media and all this stuff. And that was what set me up for the foundation of what is now a six-figure business, of just having that time and giving myself the permission to really explore what did I want this next version of my life to look like instead of just going back into autopilot, which I think a lot of us tend to do.
And I think that I love what you said about, leaning into courage instead of leaning into fear,
Yeah.
and taking the bet on yourself, really, to invest in yourself. And I think that it sounds like it was actually a blessing in disguise, right? The
Yeah.
fact that you were laid off and
These things usually are. I think hindsight always gives us a perspective of like we can then understand why something happened. When you're in the middle of it, it can feel scary as hell, but there's usually a purpose behind these things.
hmm and I'm curious to hear, what would you consider enough savings to, start to bet on yourself? For
Yeah.
me, it was 6 months, but in hindsight, I think that was way too little. I was like, wow, I was really risky then. But so I'm curious to hear from you, like, what was enough?
Yeah, I've always been super conservative too. I think that's just like the first gen scarcity mindset that makes us feel like, I want to have like 2 years of salary in the bank or something. But
Mhm.
for me, it was about 6 months worth of savings. I always had this automated, portion of my paycheck going into a savings account. And I think it's really important, like, to take the decision making out of your savings goals by using things like being able to split your paycheck into different accounts or just
Mhm.
setting up automatic transfers. And so I was always really good at that, and that is one thing that I'll definitely attribute to my mom was like a super saver, and I saw that growing up. She would have like earmarked money for vacations or for Christmas shopping and things like that. And so I always knew it was important to have money on the side for something. One thing that I think is important now, knowing what I know, I should have been saving not just an emergency fund because obviously, like, things happen in life, but I knew already at that point that I wanted to pursue entrepreneurship. I
Mhm.
wasn't saving for that goal though. So this idea of an
Mm.
FU fund is I'm obsessed with it. And if you haven't heard, it's basically, we all know what FU stands for, but it's basically like a fund to give yourself a runway to go and take a work sabbatical or go and launch that business and give yourself that financial runway to be able to take that leap without the pressure to immediately be making like, 6 figures a year or whatever. So I think if you know that there's something cool that you want to do, whether that's start a business or just take like a break at work, start saving an FU fund because it has a different energy than like an emergency fund.
Yeah, yeah, and it gives you permission
Yeah.
to also give yourself permission
Yeah.
to take that time and to invest in yourself
Yeah.
too. Well, I'm also curious, have you ever had debt?
Oh, yeah. God,
And
yes.
I'm curious to hear about, like, your debt experience and debt-free journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Debt is the thing that kept me really stuck in my career longer than I wanted to be. And so I ended up having a full scholarship for college, but it was contingent on me going to medical school or agreeing to go to medical school. And by my junior year of college, I decided I did not want to do that. And so I ended up having to pay out of pocket for my last year of undergrad because I said, well, I don't. I don't want this money. There's too much. You're asking me to do too much and I don't want it anymore. And that's obviously a super like privileged thing to do, but also it did put me into student loan debt.
Mhm.
And then on top of that, I ended up getting a master's degree while I was working full time. So I racked up about, I want to say like $57,000 of student loan debt by the time it was all said and done. And I was not great with planning for life events and saving for like vacations, and I didn't know anything about sinking funds, so I tended to rely a lot more on credit cards than I do now. I would have a lot of like vacations booked on credit cards and just mindless spending, and the lifestyle creep that happens when you start getting more and more money. I fell victim to all of that, and for a long time I just was like, well, everybody's in debt, everybody like has student loans, everybody has car loans, everybody buys new cars every couple of years, you get credit card debt, that's just how it is. But it wasn't until the me discovering the financial independence movement through podcasts that I
Mm.
realized this debt is the reason why I'm stuck in this job that I hate. So if
Mm.
I can get rid of this debt, I'm going to have a lot more options to be able to redesign my life in a career standpoint, where I want to live, et cetera, et cetera. And that was the push that I needed for me to just completely revamp what I was doing with my money. So when I began my debt-free journey, I was about 4 years into my journey as a blogger too. So at this point I was making money with that as a side project. That money I had been using on just frivolous stuff up until that point, and instead I decided to start earmarking all of that extra side hustle money towards my student loan debt. So
Mm.
instead of paying the minimum payment, which was like $500 a month, I would take the extra 1,000 or $2,000 that I was making a month from the side hustle and throwing it at the student loan debt, with the goal that I wanted to be debt free by the time I was 35, which was going to be 2020. And I ended up becoming debt free about 3 weeks before the pandemic lockdowns began. And people started losing their jobs and things got really crazy. So I was like, wow, divine timing. I was definitely in a great position to have a lot of options at that point by making that intentional decision. So it took me about 3 years to pay down my loans and my credit cards and all that stuff. And I ended up paying about the last $39,000 I paid off in about 17 months. I got really, really
Wow.
intentional about it.
Wow. And at that point, were you a full-time entrepreneur? Or
No.
what was that journey to like you were laid off, you doubled down on the blog for a few months, and then did you get a job again? Or
Yeah.
did
Yeah.
you yeah, I'm
I ended up
curious to
having
hear
to go
that.
back to corporate because,
Mhm.
I just was not gonna blogging and entrepreneurship in general, I think is something that people get enamored with, right? This idea of
Mhm.
like get rich quick schemes. I'm gonna make $1 million in my first year of business. That's not how it works, y'all. Okay. It took many years to get to this place. And I always knew that I needed to be debt free if I was gonna take the leap into full-time entrepreneurship. So it was almost
Mm.
like that became the first pillar that I had to reach in order for me to actually be able to entertain this as a real option. So, being debt free gives you a lot of options.
Mhm. Absolutely, and yeah, obviously I follow you on social media, and I saw that you hit a few big milestones for your business,
Yeah.
this year, and especially I feel like it's been gaining so much momentum, which is super inspiring to see. But I'd love for you to share some of these milestones and how
Yeah.
you felt at each point of those milestones. Like you hit 100K, you hit 500, like all of these moments. Like, yeah, I want to hear and like how you felt in those moments.
Absolutely. So I think it's important to first start off where we began, which is at zero, right? I didn't make any
Mhm.
serious money as an entrepreneur for like at least 3 years. And I think it's important to give that context because,
Mhm.
again, these things take time. It takes time to figure out what your niche is, who your audience is, what you want to sell, what your product's going to be, how you're going to market yourself. There's so many things to answer. And so the beginning of entrepreneurship is really just one big ass experiment. And you're just like trying to see what's going to work, but once you figure out the things that work, you can start doubling down on that. And so by year 4, I made my first $10,000. And that was like, whoa, like I made a whole $10,000 that had nothing to do with having a boss and with content that I was creating online. So that for me was the spark that I needed in order to just keep going. And it ended up actually like pretty much doubling every year up until 2020. I had started Yo Quiero Dinero at that point. So now I'm running two businesses, and I hit my 100K milestone, which was in my head the thing that I needed to prove to myself that I could do in order to really consider taking this to full-time entrepreneurship. Because at that point,
Mhm.
I had a six-figure paycheck. So I'm like, I
Mhm.
need to replicate this if I'm going to leave.
Yeah.
And so at the end of 2020, I found, what we did my taxes, and I was like, wait a minute, I made $101,000. Like, this is crazy. This is the thing that I said I was going to do. So now what? So I
Yeah.
made the decision in 2021, this is going to be the year that I quit my job. And I ended up leaving in May of that year, ended up quadrupling my income because now I had all this free
Yeah.
time that I was not dedicating to making somebody else money to
Yeah. So you went
help
from
me.
100,000 to 400,000.
Yes, and then
Wow.
2022, I hit over $700,000 in revenue this year, so I'm
Woo.
like, "You know what? This is proof that when you get serious about your goals and you make space for them and you bet on yourself and you double down, like, you can absolutely create even more than what you thought possible," which I was like, I never thought I'd be seeing this type of income, but you gotta take a chance on yourself. When you know that something's working, don't get afraid. Don't try and keep it small, which is what I think I did for a long time by trying to balance the safe job and the side hustle. But when I stopped calling it a side hustle and really started calling it a business,
Mhm.
that shifted the energy that I was working on it with, and it elevated me to a different place.
And do you set business goals? Do you have, like, vision boarding? Do you have any manifestation techniques? I'm curious to hear all of the, like, details in that too.
I really wish I was like so much more intentional as a business owner because I find like when I tell people, I'm not a goal setter, they're just like, but what do you mean? Like, you're just out here like doing crazy things. But I feel like sometimes goals can almost make us spiral into beating ourselves up or not feeling good about ourselves if we don't reach them or if they don't look like how we imagined them to be. Right? Like if I set out at the beginning of 2022 and said, well, if I don't make $1 million because I made like almost
Mhm.
half a million last year, then I'm a failure. And it's like,
Mhm.
wait a minute, what? Like that doesn't make any sense, right? Like, so I'm not huge on goals if you're going to be the type of person that beats yourself up about not meeting them.
Mhm.
I like having taking intentional action so that it's not rooted in a specific outcome, but it's aligned with the overall vision. So if I
Mhm.
say my goal is to have a successful business that I can live the life that I want, that I can travel whenever I want, that I can help people, that I can employ my sister, that I can retire my mom with, like those are the types of goals that I put out there into the world. It's not like, oh, I need to make $1 million and I need to have 100,000 followers by the end of the year. Like those things are so superficial to me.
Mhm. So it sounds like you set more a vision and intentions.
Yeah.
And even in the way that you started speaking about your business, calling it a business instead of a side hustle, that sounded
Yeah.
very intentional. And,
Yeah.
yeah, and I think that probably carried out in how showed up every day. Did you have a set schedule for yourself when you started working full time?
Yeah, so I one of the big things for me was like I will not be working 40 hours a week because I hated that type of schedule. So I started off doing 20 hours a week, 5 days a week, and then I realized I don't really want to work 5 days a week. So then I bumped it down to four. Now I'm down to 3 days a week, like 15 hours a day. And a lot of
Mm,
that has obviously been a result of being able to outsource, being able to put systems and processes in place, and just really getting okay with letting go of the administrative stuff that can suck up so much time as a business owner, and just really leaning into the strategy, the CEO, mindset.
mhm. And I'm curious also to hear, how did you build up your confidence? Or was that a part of this too? Or, were you born with this sort of confidence in
Absolutely not.
this? I'm curious about that too. And I'm sure some of the listeners are as well.
Yeah. People always crack up when I tell them, like, this is my worst nightmare of being like a public facing business owner because I do not like being on camera. I do not like doing media interviews, like all the things that people see me doing now. If I think back to like my 12-year-old awkward self who would like break out in hives if somebody asked me to like go up in front of the class and publicly speak, I mean, it sounded like the stuff of nightmare. So, this whole journey into entrepreneurship has just been a complete exercise in confronting every single limiting belief that I've ever had about myself, whether it is, the sound of my voice or how I look or, you know, being judged or putting myself out there and having people reject, something that I'm selling or, it's just always an exercise in getting out of your comfort zone. And I always tell people, if you really want to just address every single thing that's holding you back mentally, like go and start a business. Okay. Because you're going to be confronted with all of your crap constantly.
Oh my gosh. Yes. I can definitely resonate with that.
Yeah.
The other part is that everyone will try to give you advice or tell you what to
Yes,
do.
and it's always people who are literally doing nothing related to what you do that are giving you advice, and it's just like, you
Yeah.
gotta start learning how to filter out what's actually meaningful and what's just people projecting their own fears onto
Mhm.
you.
Oof, yes, yes, yes. And that was a hard lesson that I learned too, is that, sometimes people, if they don't believe that you can do it, it's mostly because they don't believe that they can do it.
That's facts.
And so I've gotten a lot better about, understanding that all opinions are just data points.
Yes.
I'm like, okay, well, that's your opinion. That's not really my truth here.
Yep.
But I'm curious to hear, like, what's been the most satisfying part of, starting your business? Like, if you look back at the last few years, you're living the dream. You're living the dream. Like, what has been the most satisfying part? And, later on, I want to get to the hard parts, but I first want to just rejoice a little bit on, like, what's been some of the most satisfying parts of this.
I think so many people have this dream of waking up in the mornings and feeling like they've discovered their purpose on planet Earth. And I don't think a lot of folks get that privilege. I think there's a lot of people who think that that's like a lofty goal or just a privileged way to live. And I honestly feel like I found my purpose. And that's the whole reason for human existence, right? So just being able to wake up every day and know that, like, I'm doing something that matters, I'm doing something that helps people, I'm giving folks permission to really just start questioning the things that they've been told that they are capable of, especially as people of color, inviting people to believe and to know that they can create wealth, they can become investors, they can become business owners, they can be as successful as other folks have been for generations. And just giving folks that permission, that's the most rewarding thing in the world.
Yeah, and honestly, just you existing and sharing your story, has an impact on people and in ways that you may not even know, right?
Yeah,
And
wild.
you're impacting people that, you may not even know or never meet, and, that is really, really inspiring. But I also wanna hear, like, it's not all easy, even when you're living the dream, right? Like, there's still, you have to hire employees, you may have to fire them, you have to set boundaries, you have to negotiate. I want to hear some of the, like, surprisingly challenging parts that you found, even as you found some success.
Yeah, I think it's always important to remind folks that, like, all these people that you admire on the internet, content creators, business owners, thought leaders, these are all like human beings that are all living actual human lives and dealing with drama while they're also having to show up for the business. And I am absolutely no exception, like things that I've had to deal with while building my business, like my mom being diagnosed with cancer, my sister being in a domestic violence situation that I had to intervene and, like, basically save her from that situation, my dad falling off the roof of our house and breaking his freaking leg, getting a divorce. It's just like, we're all out here going through stuff while we are building these empires. And I think when those times get hard is when it's really important to have people to lean on, whether those are coaches, therapists, friends, the community that you build, because it is not easy. And even when it's not stuff that's that dramatic, you're going to be in your feelings all the time. Okay. I'm always in my feelings as an entrepreneur. I get triggered by everything. And it's like, yeah, we always have those moments of like, what does this matter? Why am I doing this? Why don't I just go back to this stupid job, get rid of this stress, stop making my life complicated, and go live a boring ass life? But then when I think about that, I'm like, that sounds like the death sentence for me.
Yeah.
I can't go back to that. And so when things get hard, I just give myself grace and compassion to say, you know what, I'm not at my best. This is not the
Mhm.
time for me to try to create. This is the
Yeah.
time for me to get introspective and just give myself the space and permission to handle whatever it is that's going on, and know that people are not going to forget about you. You know, the world is not going to collapse if you take a couple of weeks off of your business. And you got to give yourself permission to just go and be a human sometimes.
Mhm, mhm, and especially practicing kindness towards yourself, because I think that, especially as first gen, you kinda grow up kind of being hard on yourself, and sometimes that
Yeah.
is the reason that you get to a certain level, right? Because
Yeah.
you kinda parent yourself in that way, and then later in life, you realize, I'm like, "Why am I still being hard on myself?" Like,
Yes.
I'm not there anymore, I'm not in survival mode anymore,
Yeah.
so it's really, really important to give yourself grace, and I'm so glad you shared that, and that it's not always easy, and it's not always easy to show up, but it's okay to take a day off. It's okay
Yeah.
to take a week off, and
Yeah.
the world is not going to end if that happens. But your
Absolutely.
health is number one. If you don't have your health, you don't have anything. So
And,
um,
and as people of color, I think, rest is almost revolutionary,
it
right?
is.
Because it's like this is not something that we've ever been given permission to do. So when you create that type of space in your life to be able to actually do that, you are setting up the next generation to, understand that, like, it's not all about the grind, that the hustle is not a lifestyle that we should be continuing to aspire to. There are other options, and you deserve to freaking rest.
Exactly, exactly. And, in the past, I am a little embarrassed to say this, but like, if I was sick, I would still work when I was
Mm-hmm.
sick.
Mm-hmm.
And now I just take the whole day off. I'm like, nope, I'm turning my phone off.
Yes.
No one talk to me. I am resting. And it's important to set those boundaries for yourself, but also to be a role model for your team, right? Like, I don't
Right.
want my team members working while they're sick.
Yeah.
Um, and so thank you for sharing that. And so I'm curious, like, what's next for you? And do you have any intentions for the upcoming year? And if you don't, that's fine. But if you do, I'm curious to hear them.
Yeah, so I feel like 2023 is the first full year that we can actually like go outside and be with each other. And because I literally built my personal finance brand during the pandemic, I'm really excited about meeting folks in person a lot more this year. And I'm actually going to be hosting my first live conference in Puerto Rico
Oh
in
my
June.
gosh.
Yes. So I'm going to be creating this awesome financial freedom summit where we are inviting speakers and thought leaders and influencers to talk about money in ways that we might not have heard before, especially for communities of color. This is still a very novel concept for us to be thinking about wealth and financial freedom. And so I'm
Mhm.
so excited to curate that space and really feel the community on a different level now that we can all get together. So that's my big 2023 goal, and finish up my book manuscript so that I can get this into the hands of as many people as possible. This is going to be a personal finance book that is specifically catered towards the Latina and Latinx community, which doesn't currently exist because I had to do market research. And I'm like, why is no one talking to us as if we don't interact with money? And
Yeah.
so, I'm hoping that this book becomes that gift that tias give to their
Mm.
nieces when they graduate from high school, and that it gets passed on from mother to daughter, and that it really lays the foundation for our community to start building wealth and achieving so much more than what we've been able to do up until this point.
Mhm, mhm. Those are some pretty big goals. They are both historic and epic, especially the finance summit in Puerto Rico. I am so excited to hear more details and just to see that start to play out. And I'm hoping I can join as well.
Yes, please.
Well, this was such an amazing conversation. I'm curious if there's anything else that you want to leave our listeners with, anything else that you think that Snowball community members should know, and or any words of encouragement.
Absolutely. My word for this year is accountability. I think oftentimes we make a lot of goals, we make a lot of plans, around our money. I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to get out of debt, I want to pay off this, I want to invest. But we need to put actual like skin in the game when it comes to that stuff. So if you know that you've tried to budget in the past or you've tried to pay off debt and you kind of get derailed, I think it's important to try something new. Try involving your friends, get an accountability buddy, sign up for a program, sign up to work with a coach. really get serious about your goals. And I found that when you bet on yourself, that's like literally the best investment that you can make. So
Mhm.
I want to encourage folks, do the thing that you know is going to help you reach that goal, and you got this.
I love it. I love it. And, we're going to put the links to your socials in the show notes, but where's the easiest place to people find where people can find you?
Absolutely. So I invite you to subscribe to the Yo Quiero Dinero podcast wherever you are listening to this show. And you can find out about everything that we're up to at YoQuieroDineroPodcast.com.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jannesse. And thank you for those listening to the podcast. If you're interested in building your wealth, and download our mobile app on the App Store, Snowball Wealth, or online, snowballwealth.com. I will see you soon.